can finally relate. So I recently made a video about the fantasy tropes that I love. Now it's time to talk about the ones
that I hate.
When a trope is overused in unoriginal ways, it risks becoming a cliche. But tropes aren't objectively a bad thing, it's all about the execution. Unless you like any of these tropes, in which case you're wrong. These tropes are bad. Honestly, some of these tropes that I hate, they are in a lot of my favorite fantasy books, and I can like them, but in their most basic, unoriginal form, these are the ones that I hate.
Let the hate flow through you.
But first, oh man, all the hate, it's just making it too hot in here.
NANI?
This video is sponsored by Into the AM, who sent me a bunch of awesome t-shirts. Into the AM is a men's clothing brand based in Southern California. They use eco-friendly inks and high-quality fabrics, which I gotta say make for very comfortable t-shirts. I'm gonna do some model poses now. They have some basic designs as well as graphic t-shirts, and then they got their all-over print t-shirts, such as this Team Electric one, and even underwear, people. They even got underwear. I probably shouldn't model those if I want to stay monetized. They're super comfortable, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that they've been my go-to shirts ever since I received them. They're really soft. So if you want a 10% off discount, all you gotta do is type in intotheam.com/capturedinwords, and you'll get your 10% off. And also right now, they have a 30% off Cyber Monday sale, site-wide. So what's 30%? Plus 10%, I don't know, 40% off, okay people? 40% off. That's a lot of savings. Maybe you want to get a Christmas gift. The link's in the description. What are you doing? It's right there. It's right down there. Now, just like in my last video, I'm going to break this up into character tropes, world building tropes, and plot tropes. So let's commence. We all know a Chosen One story. It's been done time and time again. It's a staple in a lot of classic fantasy, and it's still used until this day. Though lately I do feel like fantasy has overall trended away from the Chosen One archetype. There are a lot of books that I like that use the Chosen One trope, but in its basic form, it just feels very formulaic. The Chosen One usually has to be convinced of who or what they are, and they go through some angsty inner conflict as they try to deny their responsibilities. That I could relate to. They usually need to fulfill some type of prophecy and are usually the only person capable of resolving the plot's main conflict. It's just become kinda boring and, dare I say, lazy. If it isn't done well, it can just feel like a cheap plot device to justify why the protagonist is more powerful and more special than the rest of the cast. It also often skips over the character's basic motivation, and it can take away some of the narrative tension to the story. Now, it is possible to write a Chosen One without falling into these pitfalls, and sometimes I do just want to read a classic fantasy book like The Belgariad. It has a very basic Chosen One, but if I'm reading anything that's been published within the last 10 years or so, I'm just kind of expecting more. Fate of the Fallen by Kel Cade subverts this trope pretty early on in an interesting way, and the Mistborn books by Brandon Sanderson also plays with the Chosen One trope, but I would say that The Wheel of Time is the very best Chosen One story that I've read so far. Farm boy to hero. Don't get me wrong, I love The Princess Bride, and I don't dislike rags to riches at all, but the farm boy to hero trope has kinda grown stale. The thing is, many of the greats have already done this. We got Luke Skywalker starting off as a farm boy. There's Bilbo and Frodo Bagginses starting off in little old Hobbiton. And there's Rand al'Thor and the other Emyn Fielders. That's all you need. Moving on to a villain trope, unmotivated evil. We've seen this in plenty of stories. You're introduced to a villain who has no motivation or logic to back up why they're doing what they're doing. This person, or creature, or whatever it is, just wants to watch the world burn. But like, why, though? Yeah, that's what I thought, because it's easy to write. It makes it very evident to the reader who to root for and who not to root for. But the thing is, readers are not that dumb. Well, I like to see villains that believe they're doing the right thing, or maybe it's a villain that we feel bad for, but we also want to see them be destroyed. That's what I want. But villains who are villainous for the sake of being evil, that's just really boring. The character that tries way too hard to be cool, also known as the edgy edgelord, badassery needs to come naturally, or at least be deserved, but when there's a character where their whole personality is them just trying to be really edgy, I hate that. I really
Hate that.
That was me. That was me trying to be edgy. One thing that kept me from liking the darker shade of magic books as much as I could have was that Lila Bard was kind of this character. She was constantly trying to be edgy and cool, even when we're inside of her own head. She's trying to be cool to herself, and I found that just kind of annoying, and for me it just made the books not as enjoyable. The damsel in distress. This one's another common plot device, especially in a lot of classic fantasy and science fiction. This one doesn't really need an explanation. We know what it is when there's a female character that's basically being used as a prop device for the male hero to look like a hero. And of course, the damsel in distress can be found in a lot of Disney movies, like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. It's also been subverted though in movies like Moana and Tangled. It's really frustrating when a female character is given absolutely no personality and it's clearly evident that they're just being used as a prop for the hero to rescue. I also don't like the not like the other girls trope, which is often when an author tries to write a female character to only have masculine qualities because they're different than all the other girls. And it just kind of implies that feminine qualities are a bad thing, and I feel like it talks down to women just like the last trope. Teenagers save the world. Nothing against young adult, but this is a very common trope in young adult fantasy, where it's always a group of teenagers, for some reason, that gotta save the world. It's almost like authors think that teenagers can't relate to reading an adult character. Inexperienced teenagers, are they really the best choice? You know what? I'd rather read a book about a group of 90-year-olds saving the world. Thank you very much. Maybe they break a curse that's binding them to their old folks' home, and they set off into the world. That would actually be pretty great. I hope somebody writes that. Also on this note, what's with parents always being killed off? I guess authors just don't want to continue writing parents in, but hey, I like seeing a good family dynamic. Or even a toxic family dynamic can be interesting to read. Love triangles. Oh my god, I'd rather drown. Really? Haven't we had enough love triangles? Can't we make it a love square? Maybe an octahedron? Something else would be nice. Secret royalty. The reason I find this trope very annoying is that it's kind of hard to believe that the identity of an heir to the throne would be simply forgotten. Oftentimes, authors aim for this to be a huge revelation and to be a stunning plot twist, but the problem is that it's been repeated a lot, and it's just not really believable. INSTA-LOVE is another trope that I just find to be really lazy. Instant attraction, that's understandable, but die-hard love right from the get-go is just very lazy. How hard is it to write a few scenes beforehand, building up the chemistry before making them fall in love? Ripping off Tolkien. If I'm not reading Tolkien, or maybe the Forgotten Realms books, then I just don't really care for reading about elves and dwarves and orcs. Goblins get a pass, they gave us Daniel Green, but any of those other fantasy races, I don't care about reading anymore. I'd rather see fantasy authors make up their own unique races, or maybe take a mythological creature that isn't that well known and bring that into their books. That's what I like to see. Impossible to pronounce fantasy names. You know when you read over a complicated name and it's just sort of a blur in your mind, and then you open your mouth to try and speak it aloud, but your mouth just physically can't. You know, like that one dude from the Stormlight Archive. Numu Huku Maki Aki I Lunamore. You know, that guy. Actually, bad example. This one's self-aware and just a beautiful name, so it gets a pass. The world that never progresses. When you're reading an epic fantasy series that goes through ages and ages, but there's no technological, political, or cultural developments that seem to occur. It all just kinda stays the same. As much as I love the history to Middle-earth, it is a good example of this. Not a lot really changes. Though this probably has to do with Tolkien's disdain for industrialization. A Song of Ice and Fire is also kind of technologically stagnant. One thing that I love about the Mistborn books by Brandon Sanderson is that between the first trilogy and the second trilogy, there is a big advancement in civilization, and I just found that super fascinating to read, and it makes me more excited to read the future Mistborn books that Sanderson has planned. when at the very end of a book you find out that it was all just a dream. Should I be angry? Should I be sad maybe? Should I be hungry? I am a little hungry. The prophecy, the ultimate driver of conflict that you see in many, many fantasy stories, from classic fantasy up until now, you still see a lot of prophecies. It takes a really clever writer to subvert the prophecy trope in ways that it hasn't been done before, or at least to keep it interesting. The Mistborn books, again, handle prophecy in a very interesting way. Miscommunication. This happens in real life, and it's just as frustrating in fiction. Maybe a character overhears something out of context and jumps to conclusions. They end up hating each other, and of course we, the reader, know that everything can be solved with one simple conversation. When the main character, out on their adventures, slaughters tons of common soldiers because, you know, they're on the wrong side or whatever, but then, for some reason, when it comes to facing the main antagonist, they hesitate, because killing them would be stepping down to their level. Seriously? Are we just gonna ignore the trail of death? But before I mention my most hated trope ever, let me first talk about how much I hate when things end on a cliffhanger. What are you doing? So those are some of my most hated tropes. Any of these could be done well, it just takes a clever writer. Let me know all the tropes that you hate the most down in the comments, as well as what you think about these ones. And hey, if you like this video, consider subscribing and checking out some others.